Welcome to another Kundalini After Dark session. I'm your host, Brent Spirit, and I'm here on Zoom with 12 others. We've got 5 others tuning in on YouTube. Thank you all so much for joining me live tonight. If you happen to be listening to the recording in the archive and you'd like to join for the next Kundalini After Dark meeting, you can visit brentspirit.com/after dark to register. We get some conversation going. We connect, we support each other. It's always a good time. If you're tuning in on Spotify, you can leave a rating for the show. That goes a long way for me. You can hit follow as well to stay up to date with all of my new updates and episodes that are released. If you're listening in on YouTube, you can hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, all that kind of stuff. It goes a long way for me, and I really appreciate it. So the topic tonight is Kundalini Awakening and reading. I want to share some books that I've been reading lately. Recommend some books that I think are really effective for traveling this challenging Kundalini Awakening journey. We'll talk a little bit about books in general, and then I want to hear from everybody else. Maybe you've got some favorite books, maybe you've got some insights, maybe you've got some questions about your Kundalini Awakening journey. I'll do my best to respond, but I want to open the floor up for some conversation amongst the rest of the community because there's a lot of wisdom here. So I want to give everyone a chance to share as well, so we can get some conversation going about the path in general. It's always, always a good time to go in any different direction. So Kundalini Awakening and reading. So throughout my journey, I think some of the first books I ever read willingly, rather than being forced to read in school, were spiritual books. Um, I remember finding Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. I think that was the first spiritual book. That was the first spiritual book that I'd ever read. And when I picked it up, it was this huge energetic transmission that washed over me and just cut through the noise, the clutter in my being, in my mind, in a really profound way. And I didn't know a book could do such a thing. I thought books were just boring information, right? Books to me were homework or shame for not reading them. It was a lot of that associated with reading. But Eckhart Tolle's book was completely different. It was a gem. And I remember taking it to class, the French class, and not doing any of my work, but reading that book. And I remember the teacher was a supply teacher, substitute teacher. They came up to me and they said, why are you reading this book? Do the homework. And I said, honestly, there is no way that any work you give me is going to benefit me more than what I'm reading right now. So I'm going to keep reading my book. And that was somewhat out of character for me. I wouldn't have spoken to a teacher like that, but nothing could pull me away from what I was absorbing in that material. And she said, "Oh, okay, you're very articulate." And then she walked away. And I remember asking my friend, "Hey, what does articulate mean?" 'Cause I didn't even know what that meant. But this just goes to show, like, this book had really captured me. The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle's book. Um, I heard through the grapevine that Eckhart Tolle had a Kundalini awakening process himself, though he hasn't really spoken about it. But just something, just a rumor I want to spread. So do with it what you will. But that's just something that I heard. So throughout my journey, I did a lot of reading different books from Buddhism to yoga and science and some different quantum physics stuff and all that kind of stuff. It was really interesting. I gathered a lot. And then when Kundalini Awakening began to, really pick up speed in my body, I began to tap into direct insight, direct wisdom from my intuition, from my higher self, from Shakti, whatever you'd like to call it. And so I kind of got a little complacent with reading, got a little lazy with reading. Maybe read maybe one book a year, something like that now and then. But it wasn't really that important to me. But recently, after I went on retreat over December 2023, and on the retreat, I experienced the activation of my hara, which is a particular energy center in the system associated with, you could say willpower, um, getting things done, that sort of thing, among many other facets. A little bit of an obscure energy center. It's not talked about too much, But there's a lot of power there, and I was told that I could, use this energy center to invoke willpower to get some powerful things done, which has been something that I've actually struggled with over the most of my life is just the will to get things done. Anyway, that happened to me in December. Um, didn't really do much with this new sort of shift that I experienced until last month, April, there was the solar eclipse. The next day, I woke up and the motivation to get things done was just like it come alive in me in a way that never had before. I see Molly's asking here. I'm speaking about the hara. I didn't even know what the hara was on this retreat, and it's a completely silent retreat. So I was receiving this information intuitively. I was told, put your hand just on your somewhere in the navel area, and I was told this is your hara, this is your center for willpower. And I was actually told anytime you need it, you just have to say hara hara, and then that willpower will become invoked. So it did kind of get a bit of a shift for me after the retreat. Like for example, if I was, kind of laying in bed and I needed to get up, if I just said hara hara boom, like the energy would just come, I would just get up. Or if I'm caught doom scrolling and I remember, I would just say hara hara and I would just get up and go. Very strange. I don't really have many sort of, it sounds like almost like a magic spell or something. I don't know. But that was a little thing that happened to me. But anyway, after the solar eclipse, the next day I woke up and it was like this new level of motivation and willpower to get things done. So since then, I've been devouring books like never before in my life. I optimized a way to really consume a lot of books very quickly. And so the way that I do it is it's all through audiobooks. Um, Now earlier on, I thought, well, this is it. I'm listening to an audiobook. This isn't real reading. This is cheating. Um, but that's not true. I saw an article online that the brain essentially doesn't know or care about the difference between listening to an audiobook versus reading it to yourself. It's the same thing. It's virtually the same process. So anyway, Audible membership. I listen to the books on 2 times speed. So it causes me to really lock in. I pull up the free app Notion, either on my phone and during I walk or I lift weights. So either I'm walking and I'm taking notes as I'm reading. This keeps me very engaged, or between sets, I take notes. So I've been just crushing books and learning a whole lot. And I want to share some of the recent books that I've come across and let you know about them because I feel like some of them, they're not really books that, are explicitly Kundalini related, but I think they could be very effective for those going through the Kundalini awakening journey. So the books I'll share with you, they're not necessarily my favorite books of all time. They're not the best books of all time. They're just some that I've read recently that I just kind of want to share about. Um, some are directly related to Kundalini or spirituality. Others aren't. I'm a graduate student of psychotherapy, so I've also been going through a lot of books by therapists lately in preparation for the work. Um, so let me jump into it here. I have a bit of a slideshow here. So the first book I have on my list is A Path with Heart, A Guide to the Perils and Promises of Spiritual Life by Jack Kornfield. So likely that you've heard of Jack Kornfield is a brilliant meditation teacher. You put on any of his talks, any of his guided meditations, and he just speaks with such warmth, loving kindness. It's just very soothing. Um, he's a psychologist. He's an experienced Buddhist practitioner and a teacher. So in this book, he talks about the path overall, the spiritual path overall, and he has a few mentions of Kundalini at very relevant points. So he doesn't emphasize it, but it is talked about and it's contextualized within a much broader scope. He speaks about the path in really a very balanced, grounded way. He tells some great stories. There's one story I really like where he describes in the meditation hall, there was a young meditator who was also a martial arts practitioner and silent meditation retreat. He came in to the dining hall where everybody's supposed to, be eating silently in a meditative way. And he's doing all sorts of martial arts sequences, and he speaks out loud, which is, I guess, not allowed during a silent retreat. And he says, I can see everybody's past lives. And so he's clearly ungrounded. He's having obviously a spiritual opening, a valid one, but he's clearly, the meditation is been a little bit too intense for him. So he describes in the book, what they did with this meditator, and eventually they said, okay, no more meditating. I think he had to run. He had to do some work. I may be mistaken about this, but I think he had to eat meat, and there was always somebody with him. So they didn't let him, just wander off on his own, because they recognized what's happening to him. He's ungrounded. If somebody has that type of experience in the modern world without people around them that are aware of what they're going through, typically ends up in a spiritual emergency, spiritual crisis type situation. So this book has a lot of stories like this. Fantastic book. Highly recommend it. The next one here, speaking of spiritual emergency, is Spiritual Emergency: When Personal Transformation Becomes a Crisis. So this book is edited by Stanislav Grof and Christina Grof. And I see here Chris is typing in the chat here that yes, he's confirming that yes, it was eating meat. That was one of the things that they suggested in Jack Kornfield's book. So thanks, Chris. Thanks. It's nice to see that you read that book as well. It's a good one. So about spiritual emergency here. So the Grofs, they put together this book, and it features various written pieces by different people that have had some really interesting experiences on the spiritual path. Kundalini awakenings, of course, near-death experiences, UFO encounters, all sorts of these types of phenomena that all fall under this term of spiritual emergence. There's some pieces by Ram Dass. There's a piece by Jack Kornfield as well. Overall, this book addresses the problem of why spiritual awakening is not really accepted or understood by the Western scientific materialist medical model. Of course, some of us have had direct experience with this on our own journeys. Perhaps you were, sent somewhere where you didn't want to be, you were labeled, you were diagnosed with something that probably doesn't really serve you too well. And so this book in particular is very validating, because they're writing in an attempt to bring justice and raise awareness about these phenomena so that there can be a change. And this book, I believe, came out in the 80s, if not the 90s. So it's a bit dated, but very, very relevant, very relevant. Christina Grof had her own Kundalini awakening during childbirth. So, they're writing from a very informed place, and they've inspired many people and inspired a whole movement around, trying to change the understanding about what spiritual emergence really is. Highly recommend this book. I think in the Facebook group recently, somebody had come to their own conclusions that the Western system doesn't acknowledge spiritual awakening and spiritual transformation, and how devastating that is. So somebody had come to their own conclusions about that based on their own conversations and experiences. And it's quite startling, but fortunately others have, made sense of this to some degree and are working on it. So it's good to see that. Nick B says Spiritual Emergency is a great read. Yes. They have another one. It's called The Stormy Search for the Self. That's on my list. I haven't read it, but some people seem to reference that one a lot during Kundalini awakening. And so that's one you may want to may feel like checking out. The next one on my list here is Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness. I guess it's a little hard to see there with the other book in the background, but Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness: Practices for Safe Healing by David Treleaven, with the foreword by Willoughby Britton. So this one I just finished today. It discusses why mindfulness and meditation are not necessarily the safest or the best practices to just jump into if you've experienced a lot of trauma in your past. So the author explains why meditation can stir up some of the trauma that we've been carrying, and how we can use the practice and teach it tactfully, safely, with proper awareness, so that we don't approach mindfulness or meditation as if it's a one-stop, one-size-fits-all solution for people, no matter what type of challenges they're going through. Many practitioners feel that. I can still feel that way sometimes. I definitely have in the past, but this is a very fresh take like fresh in terms of, it's very recent that people are coming out and saying, hey, I think there needs to be a bit more of an understanding of trauma so that we can help people to meditate and benefit from the practice without getting, um, Christie's typing in the chat here, too much awareness, and too much awareness is dangerous for sure. Too much awareness at a premature time can be, very, very challenging. So this book is a blend of trauma-informed insights, mindfulness meditation, and social justice. I see all three of those areas coming together in this book in a really, really cohesive way. So I think this is an important read for any of those out there who may be offering mindfulness, maybe offering meditation, to others under the assumption that it's safe and straightforward for everybody. So it's good work here. And one thing they discuss is like a lot of people who have backgrounds of trauma sit to meditate and they find that they're not experiencing peace at all. They're getting a lot of chaos. And so they feel a lot of shame. They think I'm not doing it right, or something must be wrong with me. Everybody else is getting a lot of peace, and I'm just getting, more dysregulated. So that's a key theme that they address in that book as well. Definitely worth checking out. The next one here is Working with Kundalini, an experiential guide to the process of awakening by Mary Shutan. Spoken about this one before. We discussed this one in the book club last month as well. Really clear and a very experienced writer, Mary Shutan. She writes in a very relatable way, easy to understand language, a sort of universal language, you could say, but also very, very insightful, really gets down into specifics in a really easily digestible way. She talks about things from many levels, um, and talks about the different phases of the Kundalini awakening process, talks about which specific modalities, some comments on diet, different practices that we can engage in. One idea that I liked that she shared here was that spiritual awakening is difficult because it involves bliss and pain simultaneously, and it's very hard to comprehend and work with something that does this because we don't really have much in life that is super blissful but also super painful. So it's very hard for us to understand what this is. So her book aims to clear a lot of that up. Tom, the books I'm mentioning are Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, Practices for Safe Healing by David Treleaven, with the foreword by Willoughby Britton. Willoughby Britton is the founder of Cheetah House, which is doing some great work in this vein on the adverse effects of meditation. Worth checking out. Okay. Next one here is No Bad Parts, Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model by Richard Schwartz. No bad parts. So in this book, actually, Richard Schwartz acknowledges Kundalini, acknowledges Shakti, acknowledges energy flow. It is a psychology book, a therapy book, but very spiritual. And he discusses this in the work itself. It's really great because it doesn't focus exclusively on the Kundalini process, like, say, Mary Shutan's book. But this book is utterly relevant to anybody going through Kundalini, let alone anybody going through anything in life, but specifically Kundalini awakening process. Very powerful material here. Very, very powerful. So in short, what he shares is that we don't just have one mind or one self or one part of us. It's actually many different parts of us, like an internal family. There's the mother, the father, the son, the daughter, whoever. There's different parts. There's parts that arose to play different roles to protect us from, say, a tense or traumatic environment. And those parts may be stuck playing that role in an environment that today they don't necessarily need to play that role. So we can talk to those parts from a higher place, a whole place, which he calls the self, the true self. We can say, hey, protector part, thank you so much. You did such a great job protecting me when we were young and it was scary. But now things are different. You can relax. And we can really do a lot of healing. And we can work with those parts as they come up in our relationship, in life. And Kundalini will also bring these parts up. And the more that we integrate these parts Give them some time off from doing that work that they're always trying to do to protect us and whatnot. Then Kundalini can flow, and he describes this flow of energy through the system when we become more aligned with our true self and whatnot. Fantastic work. It's brilliant. I mentioned before this idea of Tor mentors, TOR hyphen mentor. This is where I got it from. He describes, certain people will come around in our lives and they'll torment us. That's helping us to trigger some of the old parts so that we can see it clearly and work with those parts directly. The work is this book is like fantastic. You can get started with doing parts work on yourself just by reading this book, but there are some therapists that specialize in it that can go really deep with you. My friends over at When Lightning Strikes have some talks with Richard Schwartz about this work in relation to spiritual emergence and Kundalini awakening on their YouTube channel, When Lightning Strikes. I think if you look up When Lightning Strikes and Internal Family Systems, you could probably find some of their videos. So they're speaking very, very closely about Kundalini and this work. But this work it's gotten very popular and many people are using it, and they don't necessarily have anything to do with Kundalini per se. It's very, very useful work. So the next book I have here is called Breaking the Cycle: Free Yourself from Sex Addiction, Porn Obsession, and Shame by George Collins and Andrew Adelman. So this book concerns those that may be suffering from porn or sex addiction, of course. It doesn't necessarily speak about something like, say, channeling sexual energy or brahmacharya or celibacy or semen retention for, spiritual development. But this is a very important theme on the Kundalini path in general. Of course, our sexual power, our sexual energy can be depleted if we are not necessarily conscious with our relationship with it. So this book explains in a very grounded way about why these addictions form and how we can overcome them. He regularly references Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and mindfulness practices, but he shares it in a way that's very accessible. It doesn't really come across as spiritual or too far out. He presents like really great metaphors and stuff that I think anybody can understand and make use of without even realizing that they're coming from, this spiritual guy, Eckhart Tolle. I read this book to prepare myself for working with therapy clients that are struggling with this type of thing. Many people are, men in particular. I will be working mostly with men at this point in my career, so I had to prepare myself in this way. As well, the topic of celibacy, of semen retention, of brahmacharya, of relating with that sexual energy in a spiritual way to facilitate our Kundalini awakening process. I have a video on it. It's my most popular video on my YouTube channel. It's not exactly the niche that I was trying to carve out for myself, but I guess that's how it goes. So this book also has some really amazing storytelling. It is quite funny and quite profound. Really, really good stuff. Really good stuff for those who may be, just dealing with these types of challenges on the path. The next one also related to addiction. This is called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction by Gabor Mate. So this is another one that I read in preparation for working with therapy clients that are suffering from addiction. Addiction is rooted in trauma and pain, and this is something that Gabor lays out quite clearly. His aim is to humanize those that are suffering from addiction, and make it very obvious that it's because they have been suffering much longer, much previously as well. And that's why they're called to addiction. And so he tells beautiful stories about, people that are really struggling. They've been through really difficult things, and it really destigmatizes addicts as if they are, subhuman or just people that are just selfish or hedonistic or whatever, whatever old ideas we may have about addiction. So I know that many that are going through Kundalini awakening are dealing with a lot of pain, and sometimes people come into this process dealing with addiction already. Sometimes addiction can be amplified as the Kundalini begins to move through the system. It can bring up a lot of stuff that can be very difficult and painful to look at, and so some people will turn towards addiction to soothe themselves especially if they don't really have proper support or proper understanding of the Kundalini awakening process. So this book, not necessarily the most spiritually oriented book. However, he does reference Eckhart Tolle's work very often, and other spiritual works as well. But he presents it in a way that's very digestible and just really great. For those that are interested, there's a conversation with Gabor and Adya Shanti online. They have like a little bit of a panel together. Very different energy coming from the two of them. Um, Gabor doesn't seem to have made any claims of any advanced spiritual development. I know he's into ayahuasca. Of course, he's reading all the spiritual books and stuff. But he's just doing such great work in this area of working with people. He does a lot of great work with topic of ADHD as well, describing it, of course, as once again something rooted in trauma, just like addiction. Very humble guy, very insightful. I was fortunate enough to have seen him talk last year sometime. Was it last year? Maybe year before, but really powerful presence, really powerful presence. And let's see which book is left here. So The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself by Michael Singer. So this is one of the books that I thought I didn't need to read because I heard so much about it from other people. It's one of those books that you're like, yeah, yeah, I hear about this book all the time. It's basically like I've read it. No, this book is really, really good. And I'm a little bit ashamed to admit that I had only read it like a couple weeks ago. Um, really good, excellent. It may be the only book that you need to get through this process. It's very accessible, very easy to understand. He presents things in a very direct, clear way. He talks about Shakti, talks about the purification process, talks about healing, but it's just like the full package presented in such a great way that I think you can read, multiple times and get something really profound each time. I'd call this book maybe like a gateway drug type of book that you can give to anybody that you can sense, if they're somewhat ripe for the path. I think it's a safe book to hand them, kind of like The Power of Now, where they can kind of read it and not be like, well, what is all this Kundalini chakra, nadi stuff? I think this is like a really, really accessible book. Highly, highly recommend it. Okay. And this one I'm still going through. This is the only book I'm actually reading. I'm not just like listening to it. That's why it's taking me a bit longer to get through. But this is Kundalini, The Master and the Disciple, Report of a Search by Q Eckstein. So Q went to see the main Kundalini Yoga master, the guru behind Patanjali Kundalini Yoga Care, PKYC. They also have great books, but this is his account of going to see that particular guru. And I'm still making my way through it, but he writes in a really great way. He talks about some of the more nuanced aspects of the journey. There's some great storytelling, some very fascinating ideas about how the teacher operates. So he would, um, prescribe specific practices that different travelers of the path would need to do based on their specific situation. So you had to go and see him in person, and he would cook for them, and they would, he would give them some teachings and some talks and lectures, and then they would all go off and do their practices, and it was all like just really great. He's passed on now, but Joan Shivarpita Harrigan and her colleague Sylvie, I haven't got her last name, but they're continuing to work from this lineage, Patanjali Kundalini Yoga Care. Fantastic work. And just for the record here, this book here, I haven't cracked it open yet, so if it's not good, not my fault. This is Internal Moving Healing, Manual of Instruction, Stopping Your Pain and Other Unpleasant Things by Robert Harry Hover. So this book was recommended to me a couple days ago by Dr. Daniel Ingram. And in it, apparently, there are some very powerful practices for overcoming pain. It seems like pain throughout the body, maybe some emotional stuff as well. Um, haven't read it yet, but I'm just sharing with you in case you're interested. Uh, the reason I was intrigued to pick it up is because Dr. Daniel Ingram said, "Hey, look, this book isn't really presented too well. Like it's looks like basically a Word document. It's not super fancy or anything. It's kind of formatted in a weird way. Um, but there's some really good info. It's really strange. I don't know. It looks all weird. But he said there's some really good tech in this book. And by tech, he was referring to spiritual tech, spiritual technology and practices. So I'll check it out. And in the meantime, if you happen to check it out before me, let me know how it goes. Okay. So I want to hear from everybody else about your thoughts on reading, on books, about how your Kundalini awakening process has been going. If you have any questions for myself or the group, we'll get some conversation going. We'll relate with one another, support one another, share some recommendations for books and resources. Before that, I want to remind you about kundaliniawareness.org. We have a directory of licensed mental health professionals, all experiencing Kundalini and able to support you. We've got a collection of stories. A few of you have submitted stories. Thank you so much. The stories are up live, so you can go ahead and read those stories and relate and enjoy the stories. Feel that you're not alone. There's a bunch of peer support groups. There's a bunch of resources, more books, more videos, and we'll see how it evolves. Eventually, we're going to put together some trainings so that therapists can be able to recognize Kundalini in their clients and either support them in some way or another or refer them to somebody who can. At least they'll be able to recognize, the patterns of Kundalini. So that's something that I was talking about with Daniel Ingram. He is one of the core members of the Emergent Phenomena Research Consortium, EPRC. So their aim is to really shift the culture in a really profound way within the medical system, within the even the levels of government, um, within the educational system, about spiritual emergence phenomena, Kundalini, all of the sort of spiritual stuff that can happen. So they're doing some really profound, powerful work. So I invite you to check out the EPRC for more about that. Like I mentioned, Spiritual Awakenings International.org. They're hosting a free 2-day conference, Saturday, June 8th, Sunday, June 9th. 40 speakers, all free, all on Zoom, live. There'll be some Q&A. I'll be presenting Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, discussing Kundalini awakening and overcoming the common challenges. So I look forward to seeing you there as well. You can visit brentspirit.com for more free content like this. And we'll leave it at that. I want to hear from you all now. Thank you so much for joining us. So Tracy's asking a question here. We'll kick it off with a question. Is it possible that people who undergo Kundalini awakening process are doing so because of our earlier traumas? Well, I think it is it is possible. What's coming to me is that there are some practices that certain ascetics and yogis would engage in to trigger development on the spiritual path, such as starving themselves, being out in the cold or out in the heat, or pushing the body to its limits to trigger, in some cases, a state of sort of dissociation, or maybe they would subject themselves to immense pain to trigger a sense of dissociation, and which could be, in some respects, though not all, could be considered an expansion of awareness, an expansion of the energetic component of the body, and therefore triggered the beginning of Kundalini awakening or some sort of spiritual development. So perhaps they engage in a process like that consciously, whereas many of us today aren't ascetics, going out and you know, um, subjecting ourselves to all sorts of discomforts. The discomforts are inflicted upon us by the world and other people, and that is what we would call trauma. And sometimes Kundalini awakening can arise as a means to deal with that pain, deal with that trauma. Perhaps not all cases, but for some people, yeah, yeah, it's because of their difficult experiences prior that Kundalini has awakened to heal, to evolve, to make peace. Molly is sharing here. I had a dream about a rainbow in the sky the other week. Since then, I felt a big shift. I finally am ready to go back to work. I feel ready to get my life together. I feel more peace. I feel a fulfillment in my relationships more than ever. I think the dream was a sign I'm getting past a lot of the very intense part of awakening. I remember, Brent, you said you had a dream that basically told you the same thing, but the challenging part of your awakening was complete. Awesome. What a great update, Molly. Thank you so much for sharing. Very inspiring. A lot of hope in your message there. And I'm really happy to hear this. Really happy to hear this. The dark night of the soul, of course, you know, the rainbow shows up. I remember being at, it was like a hippie festival. It was about 6 or 8 months after I had this major Kundalini rising. I had this, intense purification period, still kind of in it, but coming out of it. And at this festival, this rainstorm came like no other rainstorm I've ever experienced. And I took shelter in some random people's tent. There was a bunch of random people there. I think it was one guy's tent. He said, anybody can come sit in my tent to take shelter. And he was quite in tune, like a channel. And he just said, something is coming over me. Everybody, let's sit in a circle. And everybody was just completely on board with this experience. We all just sat together as if we had signed up for this, and we closed our eyes and began to meditate together. And he was leading us through some like sort of natural breath work, like very spontaneous, just saying, hey, just be with your breath and breathe. And I remember I burst into tears, cried, and then all of us, it was so strange. There was like probably like six of us. All of us just took a nap except for one guy. He went around and made sure that everyone had like a blanket or a sweater or something he just tucked everybody in. And this is the middle of the day. He tucked everybody in. We all fell asleep and this guy left. And then I woke up. I was like holding some crystal or something. I was like, man, this is just so crazy. So at this point, the rainstorm had stopped. So I walked out. I walked out in the open field and the sun is coming out. It's now like what's the word? A sunset. So there's this huge, brilliant orange and pink sunset and a double rainbow across the entire grounds of this festival. It was just really, really epic, really magical experience. Um, so yeah, after the intense purification period, these signs may come, nature may speak to you, dreams may speak to you, just like Molly was sharing here. Um, very, very insightful. Curious if anyone else has any experiences like that, telling experiences through synchronicity about, what stage of the journey you may be at or what's to come. Sometimes we don't need a, a textbook to tell us where we're at. We can just look around and see what's showing up in our lives. So let's go over here to Colin.
Hi, Brent. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Colin.
Um, what was I going to say? Um, a few months ago, um, I was at a hairdresser's appointment, and I started to get strange sensations. I'd been talking to her about spirituality and stuff, and my trip on spirituality, and she was definitely been on the trip. And it was mostly me talking, me just kind of rambling about my stuff, and finally coming out with the Kundalini stuff, and slowly she started to open up about her trip. Um, but I noticed I could start to feel her physically as she moved around me cutting my hair. Um, I don't know, the sensation, maybe compare it to like heat, how you can feel a heater. Like you get closer to a heater, you get warmer. Well, I could feel energy as she moved around me. It's almost like I could close my eyes and tell where she was, even if she wasn't touching me. I could feel her. My body could. And I know it was related to Kundalini. And then, of course, it comes out a few sessions later, a few haircuts later, yeah, she went through a Kundalini awakening experience, which I found is pretty unique considering it's like, what are the odds of picking out a hairdresser and realizing she has a awakened Kundalini? And she took so long to really come forward with it. But she seems far more advanced. She seems like it's more integrated. Um, she seems like it's really, she's kind of past the rough stuff, probably a few years ago. But and I noticed I've been I've been going through a really, really bad time, and I'm not going to bore anybody with the details. So I've been pretty low key lately, just kind of in this pretty immense suffering. And I'll be honest with you, I came to this meeting tonight just to see if I could get a little high, just to see if I could feel something, because I've been so low, and nothing is really doing anything for me now. I wish I could self-medicate. I wish I could drink. I wish I could smoke, but I can't. I really am not enjoying this trip at all. I'm no gratitude, no thanks. I just honestly, I wish it never started. But like I said, I came here just to see if I could feel anything. And sure enough, about 15 minutes ago, I started to notice that same feeling I get at the hairdressers. So I started moving my iPad around, and the feeling goes where the iPad is. So I can get high off my iPad, basically. Well, the high off the meeting, I guess. But I'm using it like you would a drug, because that's how this experience feels to me. It feels like kind of a drug, like a high. And just like a drug high, it fades away, it goes away. And just like a drug high, I don't think I don't want to get into this, but my question is, it's what is that? Why? What's the point of that? What's the point of me feeling my hairdresser? What's the point of me feeling this sensation? You know what I mean? When I go to the hairdresser, why do I need to? It's like radar. It's like I can sense Kundalini. Like I'm some Kundalini clairvoyant, like walking through the crowd. I bet I could pick out people that have awakened Kundalini. I'm like, but what's the point? Really, of that? What's the point of me feeling it in this meeting? Moving it around and feeling it. Like I said, like a space heater. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Feeling that energy. Really, what is the point?
Well, thanks so much for stopping by to share, Colin. Um, Specifically to your question, I have some thoughts, and I see Chris also has his hand up there, and I welcome others to share as well. Um, I recently listened to an interview with it's on Guru Viking's channel. It's with a Rinzai Zen master. Forgive me, I don't know the name of the individual he interviewed, but Guru Viking does fantastic interviews. Anyway, he was interviewing a Zen master in the Rinzai tradition who was describing what you're describing here. So some can call it a transmission, the radiance, Shaktipat, heightened sensitivity to energy, etc. Within Zen, typically, most Zen traditions don't talk about energy and stuff too much, but the Rinzai school seems to have a bit more of a uh, gives it a bit more attention. And so they describe what this sort of thing as ba. So some Zen masters have this ba. And he describes one practice where the Zen master would go and sit in the center of the room and radiate that ba out to the other meditators. Maybe not necessarily saying, "Hey, I'm doing this or that," but they become the space heater, like you're sharing. They emanate that heat So others are able to pick up on it and understand what that feeling is. They're able to actually feel it, which is a meditative experience in and of itself. And so that helps them to, I guess, harmonize with the frequency of it, the state of consciousness. It also is a tool for, maybe the wrong word, but a tool for conversion. It's like a visceral felt experience. It's not intellectual, it's not belief, it's like you're feeling it. It's real. So there's that use of it as well. And then also they also would offer that type of transmission in the interviews. So within Zen, people will, generally speaking, all of the students will meditate in the hall, and then individually they'll go for an interview or conversation with the teacher one on one in very close proximity. And the teacher's task is to be in that place where they're radiating, and the student's job is to figure out how to perceive it. And I don't think they typically describe this process. It's unspoken, generally speaking, from what I understand. It just happens. And if the student gets it, great. Now they go off and they have to emulate it for themselves. If they don't get it, well, they'll come back for another interview. And hopefully at some point they say, every time I sit with this person, this teacher, I feel the warmth. My mind gets quiet. I'm still, I'm relaxed, I'm at peace. I need to be like that, or I need to practice that way, or I'm actually getting somewhere. This isn't just an intellectual pursuit. So that's something that's coming to me to share it with you about that. I think there is a purpose behind it. Like, it does serve. It shows you that this is real, right? You're not just making some stuff up. As well, you're sensitive um to the energy. You're able to pick up on it from technology. And I think that is quite telling, because most people don't know they have these capabilities, but you have direct experience that you do. Now, what you do with it, if anything, that's up to you. You can also keep in mind that you also are like a radiator yourself. So others will pick up on your energy field as well. And I would argue that you are part of the field we've created on your iPad. You're on the call with us. So, it's coming right back at you, we could say. Um, just some ideas coming. Anything coming up for you as I share that, Colin?
Yeah, I guess I get a little cynical because otherwise I feel so shitty. You know what I mean? It just I'm almost annoyed in a weird way. It's like because everything else is just falling apart. It's almost like it mocks me. Does that make any
Mm,
sense? It's that's why I say what's the point, because it's like, oh, that's great, and it's amazing, and it's this kind of supernatural kind of thing, but I don't feel like it's teaching me anything, or I'm benefiting from it, or anything like that. You know what I mean? Every time I get in these states or feel that kind of Shakti energy or something, it is like it feels more like, that's the best way I can describe it, like a drug, like a high, because the way I act when it's happening is different than the way I normally am,
mm.
and I can't really explain it. And it's like when you had too much to drink and you do things you wouldn't normally do. It's like I get too much Shakti in me, and I do things I normally wouldn't do, and it's blissful and it's great and stuff like that. But it goes away. It's
Yeah.
it's like it. That's what I say. It's like a drug, like a high. Um, and it's like I wish there was more of a way to integrate that in a daily life and some kind of balance that would actually work to my favor, because I don't feel it works to my favor. I feel like it's misleading. I feel just like a drug, or just being drunk. You make bad decisions, you do this or that, and it's because of that high, but those decisions don't serve you in the real world, if that makes any sense. You
Yeah,
know what
it
I
it it
mean?
it does make sense. There are some things you can do to integrate it like long term, which is essentially what they would do in, say, a Zen tradition, where you get the sample from the teacher, then you have to go off and practice it yourself, um, consistently, sort of figure out how to hold that in a sustainable way. as well, I think it also is very important to understand non-attachment. So if we look into Buddhism in general, they have different um, levels of the path, and some levels are very blissful and spaciousness and all of this type of thing, but you can become attached to it. And if you are attached to those states, you have, if you want to keep progressing on the path, you cannot be attached to those states. You have to come to a point of equanimity where it's like, feel like shit, okay. Feel blissful, okay. And that's like real maturity. And how we get there is often through what they would call the dark night, where these pleasant things come and go. And we find through its coming and going, we find that our only solace is by practicing equanimity and non-attachment. And in that place, you know, then we're able to advance to higher states. So in some respects, though, what you're going through is, very challenging. It's a known thing that people get beautiful states, and they have to figure out how to not cling. And it's not easy. Nobody does it perfectly in the first time. I think it takes a bit of practice to eventually just come to that point of equanimity. But it sounds like you're working your way through this. Just give it some time.
All right, thanks, Brent.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And you've got some friends sharing here in the
So, could you explain more? Like, we go through mode. I went through that a few months ago, and I've just gotten the nerve up to talk about it. When I was actually just like on autopilot, like I felt like I was in my body, but I wasn't directing it and going throughout my day. And it was kind of like I took a back seat, like that movie, Get Out, where it takes a back seat and your body just goes and you just go and do things. And I think you call it, like I said, the observer. But I was more interested in hearing more about it since I can be brave to talk about it now. Do you remember anything you spoke about that?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I think you cut out for a split second there. Like you're talking about the observer, the sort of detached witness, that type of state.
Yes, yes. It was
Yeah,
a very strange state, and it happened for a week or two. And I was just like, "What is going on here?" Yes,
yeah.
yes. It was very, very. And I was actually doing things and going to the gym. It was just like I was like just sitting there in the pilot and the passenger seat.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
so is that the observe? Yeah, could you explain that a little more to me so I can
yeah.
understand going through back then? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, this is a it's a great topic. So the observer, the observer allows us access to a great spaciousness where we can allow the phenomena of life to come and go without getting involved in it. And this can really be helpful as the purification process takes place as we go through Kundalini awakening. Gives us a lot of freedom, a lot of spaciousness to just sit by and just watch it as it all comes and goes. It can be uncomfortable, however, because we can feel detached, feel outside of our body, feel ungrounded, feel disconnected emotionally from ourselves, from our relationships. It can be uncomfortable. It's essentially a type of dissociation. Um, when the energy makes its way to the head, and some people have a top-down awakening and they actually have this access from the beginning, these types of things can happen. It's essentially the mind's awareness is expanding, and you have this sort of detached witness mode type situation going on. The aim of the path, in my view, is to integrate that expanded spaciousness into the body simultaneously. It sounds paradoxical. It sounds odd within your way of speaking. I see you're driving now as well. You said, it was kind of like you were in the passenger seat. It's, in a sense, we could say it's like being in the passenger seat and in the driver's seat simultaneously. Very difficult to understand, but that's why, that's what integration is. The bringing the expanded consciousness into the human form. So for me, I had this witnessing mode become more or less permanent like 2012 before I had this major Kundalini rising. Then the Kundalini stuff brought me into my body. And now today, I am simultaneously abiding as the witness and yet fully here in the moment. It's difficult to articulate. I'm the driver and the passenger simultaneously. And so that's where we find true peace. Because if we're in totally in the body, we kind of suffocate in this body. If we have no access to the witness, we're totally identified with the body, totally identified with the mind, with the sense of self. If we're completely detached, then it's like we're kind of checked out, can't relate emotionally. We're not in our body. It's kind of spooky. So if we merge the two, we can be in the body, but also not confined by the body. It's very interesting. So like the way that I kind of experience the world is like I'm non-local. I'm everywhere, I'm nowhere. I'm in my body and I'm not in my body. It's like I can't tell you where exactly I am. It's like just it's all over and it fully embracing this body as well. So that's kind of what's going on here. Some of us who get access to that state, it's quite um beneficial for the purification process. But some of us don't get access to that state until further points on the journey, and I don't suggest actively trying to force it and make it stay because it can be quite uncomfortable if it happens. It takes you by surprise. If you haven't experienced it, no description is gonna do it justice. When you experience it, you'll say, "Well, this is not what I thought it would be." It's just something very, very interesting, but very powerful state of consciousness. So I hope that can help. I'm wondering if anyone else has any thoughts. Cat C shares here. I had an unsavory experience with someone this week, and it was my first time practicing the Tor dash mentor mentality. Wow, did it change my mindset on the situation? Fascinating. That's great. That's great. Yeah, so this is what we were discussing a couple weeks ago, I think. Some people come to push our buttons, and it's a teaching. It's mentorship, of course. We don't conflate button pushing with abuse. Button pushing is, people being a little annoying, a little disrespectful, whatnot. We can use all of that as a teaching. Yeah. So if you have something to share, please raise your hand. Be nice to hear from you all. Molly's sharing here. There's so much shame around sex. It's a super deep wound in humans. I think it was put there on purpose to keep us from our power. I'm passionate about this topic. Yeah, sometimes I can get a little conspiracy theory about the repression of sexuality, um, as well as the widespread sexualization of everything, the widespread sort of pornography. My conspiracy theorist self wants to say all of that is being pushed on the population so that they deplete themselves of their sexual energy and they don't actually cultivate it to use it for spiritual awakening and development, to overcome fear and, to find, these very expansive states of spiritual evolution. That's just my conspiracy theory approach. But yeah, there's so much shame around it. And there's so much power there. There's so much power there if we can really tap into it. Creative power, right? Spiritual power to connect with the divine. Serpent power shares here, sex is holy. It's the instrument of creation for the infinite creator. Yeah, beautiful. Molly shares here, the untethered soul. My sister is reading it. She told me to. I'll take that as a sign. Awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend that one. Deborah's recommending a book here that she first read, that she began to become aware. Toward the One by Pierre Vilayat Inayat Khan. I believe, yeah, the Sufi practices. Awesome. Seems to be a bit of a hard find. I see it's going for $200 Canadian on Amazon. Probably out of print. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is out of print. Deborah's sharing that. Interesting. Yeah. I had a conversation with Joe on my podcast, Joe DeRizo, and he spent some time with some very advanced travelers of the Sufi path. And he had a Kundalini awakening 50 years ago. And when he describes his integration of the Sufi teachings into his Kundalini awakening, it is so fresh, so fresh. It's not like yoga, it's not like Buddhism. It's something really fresh and different. And yet at the same time, if you have, the openness to hear, it's the same. It's the same as yoga. It's the same as Buddhism, but the language, the practices, the ideas, it's coming from a whole different angle. So Sufism is for some might be an untapped avenue for some powerful, powerful teachings and practices. Thanks for sharing that one, Deborah. Serpent Power is asking, has anybody read The Biology of Kundalini by Jaina Dixon? Red Pill Queen shares here. Excellent. I've been long distance friends with her for many years. She sent me so many wonderful herbs and treatments in the mail. Grateful to know her. Oh, that's fantastic. Fantastic. I've referenced her book, but I haven't had the chance to dive in yet. Chris is sharing here. People are going to be so lucky in 10 years. So much more resources. Yeah, the internet has really opened us up so much. Hopefully that the information is widespread and accepted. I mean, that's what we're trying to do here, just by having these conversations with KundaliniAwareness.org. Like I mentioned, the EPRC, When Lightning Strikes, Kundalini Collective, Spiritual Awakenings International. There's many organizations that are working together to bring more resources and awareness about all of this. Hugo shares here, the last book I really enjoyed is one called One Truth, One Law. I Am, I Create by Aaron Worley. What I enjoyed about this one is that for me, Kundalini journey has been about breaking through conditioning and stepping into and owning my life, to not point fingers and blame, to create and come to know that I am made in my image. I am the creator and am one with creation, that I am not a victim of circumstance, which I perceive myself to be prior to remembrance of my being. I prefer the word remembrance rather than awakening. Love that. Love that. I understand your preference there. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's remembering what we've always known, right? Remembering what we've always known. Fascinating. I think what you shared here outlines some of the benefits of Kundalini awakening, Hugo, right? To create and to come to know that you're made in your own image, that you are the creator and that you are one with creation, that you're not a victim of circumstance. Brilliant. One Truth, One Law. I Am, I Create by Aaron Worley. Red Pill Queen sharing here. Feeling empowered in celibacy right now. I've learned as much from that as I did in the hypertantric phase, especially in this yucky hookup culture. Right. Someone is asking in the chat here, has anyone else had difficulty or non-existent? Any has difficulty, I guess, achieving sexual orgasm, or it's not existent at all. So at times, if the energy is needed for development, spiritual development, can be difficult to cultivate the libido. And then, of course, reach orgasm, you could say. Um, you may note that though Kundalini is not a sickness, it does require a lot of energy. It's not a sickness, though. But sometimes when people are sick, they don't have a libido either because the body says that's not a priority, right? So the same way, sometimes it's not a priority. And so the energy can move upwards and to higher energy centers that can work in that way. And so that can cause some disturbances in the libido. At least that's been my experience. It's been kind of what I've gathered in conversations with others and reading and whatnot as well. Hopefully in time, things can rebalance. Vijay is sharing here, I'm aiming to read Dr. Bonnie Greenwell's book, Being Awake, someday. I've heard of her other books. I think the Kundalini Awakening Guide. Let me look up that one, Being Awake. Being Awake, Essays on Awakened Living, forward by Adyashanti. Cool, I didn't know this one was out there. I like books like this that are just kind of short essays. Cool. It's a short one too. Noemi's sharing here. The book Awakening Shakti is beautiful so far. It's a lot about Hindu mythology, getting in depth to the stories of the deities associated with Shiva and Shakti. Super interesting stuff. Awakening Shakti. Awakening Shakti, the transformative power of the goddesses of yoga by Sally Kempton. Oh, okay. Awesome. Should add this one to my list as well. Kat's sharing here. I'm in the midst of reading Dreaming Through Darkness by Charlie Morley, which is about meeting your shadow and working with it through lucid dreaming. As someone who's been doing a lot of shadow work and gets a lot of my download science through dreams, it's been a really cool combination of topics to dive into. Inner Work by Robert Johnson is also good for interpreting dreams. Awesome. Yeah, there's a whole thing I was just discovering about Tibetan dream yoga. Tibetan dream yoga. I never got too into lucid dreaming like as a practice, though I know that there's a lot of growth that can be done there. I think somebody during the Spiritual Awakenings International Conference, June 8th and 9th for free, is presenting on lucid dreaming. But I think they're presenting on it from like a way that like a sort of scientific perspective and how we can use those experiences for spiritual development, personal development, shadow work, like you're sharing here. We'll have to see exactly what they're speaking about, but that's what I got from the brief uh, word that I heard about their presentation. Anybody have any experience with lucid dreaming? Anything interesting to share? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, me again. Sorry. Yeah, I did. I was taking a certain medication 30 years ago called imipramine and also chloromipramine, and they will allowed me to lucid dream almost every evening, every night. For when I was on them for several years, and all I had to do was focus on the desire to lucid dream as I went to bed, as I went to sleep, saying to myself, I will lucid dream tonight, I will lucid dream, etc., etc., until I fell asleep and suddenly I'd pop out of my body and fly. And that was one of the most freeing feelings. It was just absolutely amazing to be able to fly. And I do it every time. When I went off those meds, I lost the ability to, except with extreme effort on my part, using the same tactic, the same technique of saying I will lucid dream tonight, but still more often nowadays I just fall asleep and into a deep sleep and don't. But you can meet very interesting beings lucid dreaming, and some of them don't like being bothered. They'll let you know. It's not that they're going to do you any major harm that I noticed, but they'll let you know they don't like it one way or the other. They don't like being spied on. How would you feel if somebody suddenly popped into your life and was watching you and they're doing something? Yeah, that's one way. The other way, there's a little book out called anyways, there are a number of books on how to induce the lucid dream state, and they all share basically the same thing. Maybe somebody, there's technologies now that will put you into the right brainwave pattern. I don't know what it is, but good luck with it. It's really a pleasure, and but yeah, it's one of those things you can do that's really feels really good. Maybe talk to some fully enlightened gurus or something. Talk to God. Why not? He's right inside you. She's right inside you. Whatever.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Yeah, very inspiring. Very inspiring. Yeah, there's some great practices, you can ask, am I dreaming throughout the day? And by habit, you'll do that in a dream, and eventually you'll say, wait, I am dreaming. Yeah, my experiences, whenever I've had them, they've been pretty cool. I just never went down that rabbit hole. I know some people become very skilled at it, very, very skilled. Like Red Pill Queen here is sharing, I'm so into lucid dreams. Took a shamanic workshop on it for weeks. I take Kalia Z, a dream herb tea or other herbs. Amazing. I journal and use a dream dictionary regularly. Try peanut butter at bedtime. It helps. Great tips. Interesting. Interesting. I know that, with something like Chat GPT, can describe your dreams and it can offer some interpretations, some interesting AI apps for dream interpretation. In the past, people would have to go to a dream dictionary and look things up, but now you can have a full conversation with the AI and see what it comes up with. Interesting stuff. Molly's asking, anyone else feel like their sense of self has changed a lot, sometimes more than others, but feels almost like you don't have a self anymore? And Nick is relating here. Red Pill Queen is relating. Hugo's relating. I'm relating as well. Not that it feels almost like you don't have a self anymore. I would say that it completely feels that way. And it's also the realization that there never was an individual sense of self here to begin with. So many within certain spiritual circles, particularly non-duality, will really focus on this idea of no self, of awakening out of the sense of self, and ignore matters to do with the body, the energy system, trauma, karma, the nervous system, etc. So they have the realization, no, there's no self here, and then they ignore the body. To avoid that, I don't talk about this idea of no self too much. I prefer to bring our attention to the body and allow the Kundalini to, on her own, bring us to these states like you're describing. And this is exactly what it is. I mean, others are here are relating as well. Yeah. Like this idea of me, my, I falls away. Because that's all. I mean, there's no room for any of that anywhere in the mind anyway. Where would it be? The mind is just a field of awareness, and thoughts arise one at a time, come and they go. There's no self there. There's no ego there. There's no me. It's all just one field of consciousness, and Shakti is dancing in that field, and we're part of that dance. This is where the idea of oneness comes from. This is where the idea of Kundalini bringing us into a state of oneness comes from. It doesn't show us oneness. It just removes the part of us that thinks there's separation, revealing the oneness that always was there. So, very interesting. Very interesting that this is happening to more and more people. Sense of separate self falling away. Okay, everybody, let's pack it up here. Let's get some sleep. Thank you all so much for joining. Once again, it's a fruitful conversation for me. I hope some value was shared when I was talking about the books. I know it was a bit of a, maybe you could say, boring topic. I don't know. If you have some suggestions for topics that we can talk about, please send me a line. I'm open. Can see how things go. We'll meet again next week, same time, same place. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern, Kundalini Q&A meeting on Zoom. Stop by. We'll support one another. Be a good time. Check out kundaliniawareness.org. Submit your stories. If you'd like to meet with me one-on-one, you can find out about that at brentspirit.com. Sign up for the Spiritual Awakenings International Conference, June 8th, June 9th. Free. Lots of great presentations to look forward to. I appreciate you all. Thank you all so much. And to all those that have offered a donation, it's because of you that we're able to do this. So thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Get some sleep. Enjoy your week. We'll touch base again soon. Much love. Much love.